1999, Russian-born criminal Sergei Zirinov and his constituent Amar Suloev formed a gang. While the name of their gang is unknown to the public, its members and the crimes they committed are well known and documented in the archives of SKR, the Investigative Committee of Russia. Zirinov and Aryan recruited 8 men to help them, including ex-police officers, court officials, and businessmen. These are not the guys you might expect to run in the same circles as Zirinov, a well-seasoned criminal. However, their unsuspecting image made them just the men for the job. The gang carried out robberies, committed murders, and trafficked firearms all across southern Russia for years. They controlled a significant chunk of organized crime in Anapa, a beautiful resort town located on the northern coast of the Black Sea. However, the reign of Zirinov's gang only lasted for so long. In 2013, Zirinov's gang put on coordinated disguises in preparation to assassinate Russian real estate mogul Malaya Bukta. While many details surrounding the murder are still under wraps, the Investigative Committee of Russia confirmed that Bukta was killed for refusing to follow Zirinov's orders. The gang didn't stop at Bukta, they also killed his wife and his business partner. Many members of the gang were detained in connection to the triple murder. 2 members cooperated with authorities and received 13 and 16 years in prison, respectively. Zirinov and 3 others were convicted of murder, banditry, and illegal circulation of firearms. They were all found guilty in 2016. Zirinov was sentenced to 22 years in prison, and his 3 associates all received 15 to 16 years in prison, where they remain to this day. But this is only 6 men total. What about the other 4? Co-founder Amar Suloev was never detained, nor was ex-police officer Igor Nikayenko. 3 of the group members are still, according to the latest information, at large to this day. During the trial, the 10th and final member of the group, Amar Suloev, was released on bail due to his visible suffering relating to a medical condition. As it would later be found out, Suloev was bleeding internally on the stand. He couldn't keep food down and he was rapidly losing weight. The judge wouldn't permit him to be hospitalized, so he sat on trial, slowly dying. If you're a mixed martial arts fan, this name might sound familiar.
Amar Suloev has recorded 23 wins and 6 losses. He stands 5'9", weighs in at 185 pounds, fighting out of Kalinin City, Russia.
This is the same Amar Suloev that fought the likes of Chuck Liddell, Dean Lister, and Phil Baroni in the UFC. All of that was behind him. Now he sat in a courtroom, slowly perishing, facing over a decade in prison. Strangle Gang, if you enjoy these type of documentaries, I post them every single week, so make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a video. Let's get back into it.
And this guy will knock your freaking head off.
Amar Suloev was born into a Yazidi family in the Armenian Soviet Socialist Republic, a republic of the Soviet Union that eventually became Armenia. During World War I, many Yazidi communities hosted Armenians that were fleeing genocide across the Ottoman Empire. Today, most Yazidi families in Armenia are the successive generations of these refugees. Little is known about Suloev's family, but the statistics indicate that these refugees may have been his recent ancestors. It's unknown how a young Suloev discovered martial arts, but he gravitated towards them at a young age. As a kid in Tashira, Armenia, Suloev began training kickboxing and Greco-Roman wrestling. These skill sets would give him a nice foundation for his inevitable mixed martial arts career. His kickboxing experience made him a powerful striker with an excellent stand-up game. His Greco-Roman wrestling background enabled him to dictate where the fight went, and he used it to dominate in the clinch. Suloev also took an interest in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a martial art that, as we know, is foundational to modern MMA grappling. Around this time in the late 90s, mixed martial arts was still an up-and-coming sport. In 1999, Suloev joined Red Devil Sport Club, a mixed martial arts academy and team based out of St. Petersburg, Russia. In the same city, Suloev made his professional debut against Andrei Semenov at the 1999 M1 Global Championship. He lost by submission in the preliminary fight. Following this loss, Suloev got 1 win via no-show in 2000, followed by another loss via unanimous decision. This was a rough start to Suloev's professional career, 1 calendar year in the books, and he had no successes to point to. Entering the 2nd year of his professional career, Suloev won 12 fights in a row. He flipped a switch and began racking up well-earned wins. Submission by armbar, KO, TKO, submission by rear naked choke, you get the picture. Suloev was finding his rhythm. This impressive stretch landed him a match in UFC 35 against none other than Chuck the Iceman Liddell. As you all know, Chuck Liddell's my favorite fighter of all time. He had a huge effect on me in my teen years, and if you haven't seen that fight, I definitely suggest checking it out. At this point, 2001 to 2002, Liddell was in or approaching his prime.
Beautiful out on his feet. Very impressive Chuck Liddell. He was confident all week.
To no one's surprise, Liddell broke Suloev's win streak.
Coming back with one of his own. No, Liddell taking it there. There's a right.
That might be the one that got his eye. Countering well. Oh my!
Nice over the top there with the forearm.
30-27 for the winner by unanimous decision, the Iceman, Chuck Liddell.
While disappointing, Suloev saw this match as only the beginning. Months later, he faced Baroni in UFC 37. It was another harsh loss, this time via TKO.
10 times better shape than he was in the Liddell fight. And look at he's throwing the rights now. Raining it down. He's got the fight. Phil Baroni is victorious.
However, Suloev didn't give up. It wouldn't be his last UFC fight, and it proved to be inspiration for another win streak. Following his loss to Baroni, Suloev went on to win 11 of his remaining 14 professional fights. His last fight was in 2008, a win against Jacek Bushko, an M1 Challenge 2 in Russia. He decided to end his professional fighting career on a high note, announcing his retirement shortly thereafter. Since joining Red Devil Sport Club in 1999, Suloev spent nearly all of his time in Russia. Not only was the team headquartered in St. Petersburg, that's also where most of his fights were held. M1 Global is also based out of St. Petersburg, Russia, the promotion with which Suloev made a name for himself. Everything revolved around St. Petersburg, which meant Suloev had to live there if he wanted to properly prepare for his MMA career. Outside of his intensive training regimen, Suloev established roots in St. Petersburg. It was his new home. While he didn't have much time for a social life during his career, he certainly made connections leading up to his retirement. One of these connections would end up being none other than Sergei Zirinov. It's unknown how Suloev initially made contact with Zirinov, but he was likely recruited based on his fighting ability. Zirinov likely saw Suloev as an asset to his gang. He was a young, up-and-coming fighter that no one would suspect to be involved in organized crime. He could do the dirty work that these older court officials and businessmen didn't want to do. Suloev was a hired gun, and now that his MMA career was over, he had plenty of time to make money elsewhere. To understand what landed Suloev on trial facing 15+ years in prison, you have to understand the history of the Cossacks. For centuries, Cossacks have been a significant presence in Russia and Ukrainian politics. The group began in the 15th century as an independent, tenacious assembly of hunters. They evolved into a militaristic group of horseback, similar to the Mongol Empire. Over the centuries, they gained influence in Russia and Ukraine, eventually making ties with the Soviet government. Their independence was assured by the Soviet Union in exchange for their availability as soldiers. At one point, Cossacks were to the Soviet Union what Minutemen were to the new American colonial militia. The difference with Cossacks was their staying power. They became a cornerstone of combat across most of Eastern Europe. In recent years, Cossack tradition was slowly being reinstilled into the Russian military. They're not just a historical group, their ideology is still very relevant to modern combat. If you didn't follow any of that history lesson, just know this: Cossacks have deep historical ties to the Russian government. Their power and independence has always taken priority, which some people see as a threat to this day. Enter Nikolai Nestorenko, deputy leader of the Anapa City Cossack Society. He's the Cossack figure of Anapa. Sergei Zirinov, the leader of the largest organized crime group in Anapa, didn't particularly like the Anapa City Cossack Society. They were a threat to his power. Cossacks not only have influence within the federation, but local authority as well. In the eyes of Zirinov, something had to be done. The gang organized a hit on Nestorenko. They needed multiple men on the job: a shooter, a lookout, and a getaway driver. On the day of the assassination, Nestorenko was sitting in the passenger seat of his car next to his driver. The unidentified shooter approached the car, firing multiple shots into the front seats. He assumed that Nestorenko would be driving, so he aimed behind the wheel. He shot and killed Nestorenko's chauffeur, merely injuring the deputy in the process. Zirinov's hitman thought he got the job done, but Nestorenko was still alive. Zirinov's gang fled the scene quickly. The getaway driver? Amar Suloev. This botched assassination and his successful hit on Malaya Bukta prompted legislation. Ziranov's gang was now on trial, and it didn't look good for any of them. Suloev was present at multiple hearings from 2013 to 2016 in relation to both cases. He was snitched on by an undisclosed gang member seeking a shorter sentence. This gang member told the jury that Suloev was the getaway driver of the attempted Nestorenko murder. Suloev sat in the courtroom agonizing over his inevitable prison time. He knew he was going away for a long time, and the dread was weighing on him. He began to feel sick during many of the hearings, to the point where he needed medical attention. It was discovered that Suloev had stage 4 stomach cancer. This stage is classified by cancer spreading to the brain, lungs, and/or vital organs. Suloev was in serious pain, but the trial carried on without granting him proper medical attention. The doctors knew he needed constant medical attention, but Judge Oleg Volkov would not allow it. Suloev couldn't eat without throwing up. He could hardly stay conscious. The man was literally dying on the stand, where he repeatedly had to beg for immediate medical attention. Judge Volkov would not permit Suloev to be hospitalized, keeping him in his jail cell while not in the courtroom. In December of 2015 to January of 2016, Suloev reportedly lost 48 pounds while being held in his cell between hearings. During one of the final hearings, Suloev said to Judge Volkov, "Your Honor, I'm getting worse and worse. It's kind of a vicious circle. I cannot participate in the process. From the court, they returned me to the pretrial detention center, where no one cares about my condition. No one takes care of my treatment. I'm not trying to make you feel sorry. I can bear whatever you want, but what am I here for? I really don't understand what's going on. I don't listen to anything. I feel dizzy, noisy in the ears. Weight loss continues. I ask you to be understanding and reschedule the meetings." This was obviously harsh, unreasonable treatment of a suffering individual. Suloev clearly needed to be hospitalized, something the doctors knew fairly early on. What happened here? As it turns out, Judge Volkov's insidious inaction wasn't rooted in evil. He wasn't enjoying watching Suloev suffer. He didn't want to see a man die in the courtroom. The reason Suloev wasn't hospitalized sooner was the result of a clerical error. Judge Volkov's understanding of Suloev's medical condition was based on a certificate from the pretrial detention center. This certificate stated that Suloev was in a fit medical state to stand trial. How could it be? He was in the later stages of stomach cancer, clearly needing 24/7 medical supervision. Unfortunately, the mistake of one paramedic made all the difference. While filling out the call card authorizing hospitalization, the paramedic misspelled Suloev's last name, instead writing Suvoev. This resulted in a green light pre-trial medical certificate, forcing Suloev to sit in a courtroom, bleeding internally, dying slowly and painfully. He was eventually released on bail and hospitalized. Even if Suloev received proper medical attention sooner, the outlook of his cancer was grim. And even if by some miracle he recovered from his condition, he would have faced over a decade in prison due to his involvement in multiple murders. Amar Suloev, once a promising young MMA fighter, faced his fate in 2016. He was in turmoil physically and emotionally, and on June 27th, he passed away. Suloev's stomach cancer diagnosis was heartbreaking, but out of his hands. Although he should have received proper medical attention far sooner than he did, there was no saving Suloev. His self-imposed relinquishment to a life of crime was equally tragic but preventable. The choices he made post-retirement will, unfortunately, overshadow the legacy of his MMA career.